Hello everybody and welcome back to the farm. Well, time has come, spring is here, and it's time to get set up for a great new feature of the farm this season, honeybees. So you may remember that I built a cool Autoflow Beehive. I'll post a link to that. I did that back in the winter. So a few weeks ago I started assembling what is to be a pressure treated table, essentially, that the beehive will sit on, and I made it large enough so that I can expand to a few different beehives either this year or in coming years as the need arises, and I gave them a beautiful home right by the pond. So once I brought the top frame of the table down to the area that I set aside for the beehives down by the pond, I went back and I got the loader and I filled up the bucket with all sorts of lumber and tools and all the stuff that I would need to construct this table on site. Now this project in its entirety is something that I've been looking forward to for months. I love honey, I love the idea of having honeybees, and I love the fact that in one large effort I'm going to be able to complete this entire project. I had to wait until the weather cooperated a little bit to construct the table, cut all the pieces, and then bring it all out to the farm so that I could build it on site. And unfortunately, because of the weather, I was only able to do this the day before the honeybees had to be picked up. So although it's probably about 45 to 50 degrees out on the day that I'm constructing this table, I couldn't wait any longer. So I got right to work. I put the legs in, I used construction adhesive on all of the different joints to make sure that this table would stay nice and tight for years to come. I made sure it was on a nice level surface, and the frame of this table turned out quite nicely. So with the frame complete, I had to hop back in the loader and go back to the barn area of the property. And I had to pick up some decking. That's going to be the top surface of this table. I wanted it to be exactly like you would build and frame a deck on a house, with little gaps in between the decking so that water could drain through and dirt and debris and anything else that settles on the table. I didn't want this table to collect water or for anything to pool up on it. So once I got the wood decking back to the pond, I simply moved all of it down to the table, and it's very awkward for me to do this because I suffered 2 shoulder injuries this past year, and although this is only 2 pieces of decking, this was a very painful thing to do. So I managed to get all the pieces of wood situated, and then once all of the pieces of wood were there, it was simply a matter of laying everything out so that there were roughly equal gaps between all of the different pieces of wood. And then once that process was done, I could simply move forward with screwing all of the individual decking pieces down to the table and move this part of the project toward completion. Now unfortunately there were a couple warped pieces. They had quite a twist to them and a bend, so I did pick up a couple extra pieces and I did manage to swap them out before I screwed everything down. And once I swapped the pieces out, they fit nicely. As you can see, the overall table came out very nicely, and I always have to tell myself that I'm not building a showpiece, I'm building something functional. So the imperfections of this, although it drives me crazy looking at it in this video, it's functional. And in the grand scheme of things, I don't think the bees are going to mind much at all. So with the table done, phase 2 now begins. I need to hang a couple caution signs and clear up some of the ground heading down toward the table. Now this is actually quite a steep slope here. It doesn't look like it on the video, but there's about a 5 or 6 foot elevation change between where I am at the top of this hill and all the way down at the bottom where the table is. So I wanted to clear all of this out, of weeds, of sticks, of the ferns that were growing wild, and I wanted to plant some perennial wildflowers for the bees. So before I did that, I unwrapped the bee signs, grabbed a couple screws, and there are 2 trees on either side of the walkway down to the table, and I figured I would hang one sign on each of these trees at head height as you're standing up on the road toward the top of the hill there. And that way anybody entering this area, hopefully there's nobody, but if anybody were to come in this area, they would be able to see that there are bees, this is an active beehive, and to stay clear. With the signs hung, I grabbed my bag of mixed perennial wildflower seeds. This was about 30 packs of perennial seeds of varying types that I bought at Walmart earlier this spring, and I just mixed them all together, and I'm scattering them on each side of this path in hopes that they grow big and strong and wild for the bees. So bright and early the next morning, 5:30 a.m. to be exact, it's 30-something degrees out, I grabbed Megan and we took the hour-and-a-half trip to Skaneateles, New York, with the obligatory stop at Starbucks on the way to pick up my nucleus of bees. Now, Skaneateles is a beautiful town, and we managed to find the property, and this property was amazing. It was beautiful, had a great view, and tons of beehives. And this is the owner and head beekeeper of cnybeekeeperschool.com. His name is Aaron. He's an awesome Australian guy, super friendly, and he was more than happy to impart his wisdom. So we strapped the bees in for about an hour-and-a-half ride home. We took a trip through downtown Skaneateles because it's just absolutely beautiful. So if you ever go to Skaneateles, one of the places that you absolutely have to go to is the Sherwood Inn right here, this blue building. It's a restaurant and they have wonderful food. Also, the water here, the lake, is completely crystal clear. You could see right to the very bottom in great detail. You could go on boat cruises, you could hang out in the little park, they often have bands here. It's just a really nice place to be. So a little while later, we made it back to the farm, and the bees survived the trip, strapped down, still buzzing away in their box. The night before, I brought the Autoflow Beehive that I built during the winter over to the farm, and it was just a matter of carrying everything back down the side farmer's trail to the area that I designated as the bee sanctuary. With the table in place, it was just a matter of setting everything down, making a couple trips to get all the rest of the equipment, and then getting down to the business of the day, which is transplanting the honeybees from their boxed nucleus into the hive that I created. It really is a wonderful area picked out for them. And here are the stars of the show, the bees being transported in style, Megan carrying part of the hive, and everything set up on the table, ready to go. I even went on Amazon and I purchased the highest rated pollen patties to put into the hive to jumpstart the feeding of the bees. These frames were also purchased unassembled as a kit from Amazon. They were easy to put together and likewise a fun project. You have to remove 5 of these frames. This is a 10-frame box, and then 5 frames filled with bees are in the box I just picked up from Skaneateles. I even have a mascot for the beekeeping program. Okay, so let's talk about the suit. The suit is a pain, but it's a necessity. But let me tell you, having to put this thing on, I understand why there's a lot of beekeepers that don't like to wear these. It was about a 15-minute process to get this all put on, zipped up, made sure that everything was sealed, and to get situated in. The gloves, fixing it over the boots. And this was just a cheap, lightweight suit. It was about $40 on Amazon. It was nothing like Aaron's suit, which is super heavy, super thick, and about $300. This one is supposed to be lightweight, and while it's only about 45 or 50 degrees today, it got really warm in that suit really quick. Just wait for upcoming videos where it's about 80 degrees and I have to put this suit on. It's just miserable. You just sweat everywhere. You could hardly see, there's just so much sweat. But I got everything put on, and at long last, it was time to uncap the bees and start the transplant process. So this is a very surreal experience. When you release that cap, immediately a cloud of bees go everywhere. And I'm not gonna lie, there's a moment of panic if you've never done this before when you start getting swarmed by these bees. And the buzz is just deafening. I can't describe how loud the buzz is. Megan was talking and I couldn't hear her. I had to step away a couple times because every time I moved, it was just a cloud of bees were attracted to me. Bees are super sensitive to movement, and that's going to play a role in some calamities that Megan experienced while I was doing this process. So getting these frames out of the cardboard box is a chore because the bees set up an ecosystem inside this box. So there are wax combs on the sides, on the front, on the top of these frames, and you have to get these things out of the box, but while doing that you're also breaking some of the wax structures, and the bees don't really like that, as you can see in this video. And I just kept thinking how surreal it is and how I hoped that every seam was sealed on this suit that I was wearing, because there were a lot of bees on me. So when you take the frames out of this cardboard box, you have to put them into the hive that you built or purchased in the exact same order. There's a natural order to the way the bees set up their hive, how they build their comb. And if you start mixing and matching these frames inside the new hive, very likely the bees will swarm and they'll leave. So clearly that's not good when you've paid almost $200 for a colony of bees. So it's a very gentle process to pull these things up and out of the cardboard box. Try not to disturb the bees, try not to disturb their comb structure, and trying to make sure that you pull these things straight up and out so that you don't roll the bees or squish the bees, by pulling these things out in an angle and, rubbing the frame against some bees. You definitely don't want dead bees. So, the process was pretty straightforward, except for Megan. Megan was not liking the process. Megan doesn't like bugs at all, and two bees took a liking to her, and she was making all sorts of sounds back there. Apparently, two of these bees found her. They found her hair, and that was it. Megan's attention span went to 0 as she was panicking over these two bees in her hair. So during all of that happening up the hill, I did manage to get all of the bees and all of the frames put into the hive. The hardest part of this entire process was actually inserting the new frames that I built. It's really tight in there, and when you're trying to insert these things next to live bees, it's challenging. But everything fit in, and as you can see, the bees have plenty of room to expand and grow, which is wonderful. You want the bees to fill every inch of this space and produce lots of honey. So the final thing was to put the pollen patty in and make sure that you didn't squish any bees in the process, and then get the cap put onto this. Now during this, Megan was making all sorts of screams, so I had to stop and turn around, and there she is with propeller arm running away down the path. Those two bees, they just wouldn't leave her alone, and yep, she did end up getting stung a couple times. But remember what I said, bees are super sensitive to motion, so if you're fairly still and calm, they won't do anything. However, if you do one of these things, yep, you're probably going to attract a couple bees and things are not going to go well. But luckily, nobody here is allergic to bees, and it was just something we laughed at. So as you're about to see, I'm going to be putting the roof structure onto the beehive. What I did not put on here is the super box, and that's the box where the bees produce their honey. That doesn't get put on until the empty frames are about 80% full, and that could take anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months, depending on the availability of nectar and pollen. Rehoming complete. And there you have the process. Now you'll notice that I didn't smoke the bees or pull out the smoker, and that's because Aaron said the bees were going to be irate as it was from the transport, and really the smoke wouldn't have done anything much here. But that's it for this video. Stay tuned because there's a lot more bee content to come. We have to check the hive in a week and a couple weeks, and then we have to deal with the field, the broken down tractor, the pile of brush, the garage, and so much more. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.